Hello, people. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of My People, My People. I am Eric, your host for this continuing talk and thought extravaganza. And before we get into our topic today, I want to say thanks for tuning in. If you like what you hear or see today, please go to our channel on YouTube. Subscribe, give us a thumbs up, leave your comment. We like the good ones. We don't necessarily like the bad ones, but guess what? We still live in a country where you have the right to express yourself, and if you got something bad to say, I'll listen to it, won't censor you or anything like that. So, I always start off talking about why I do what I do, and most of my videos are going to be aimed at trying to cross lines, bring people together, make us all understand that as human beings, we really have a lot in common. A lot more in common with each other than we do with those that continuously seek to divide us today. So a lot of my videos will venture into the realm of politics, of religion, of race, of those things. But we're going to talk about something a little bit different today. When I was talking to one of my kids a couple weeks back, he brought up what I think is a good topic. And today we're going to talk about bullying. Now, why is this an important topic? Well, we started off with the song there, Scar Tissue, and the line from the song is, "Scar tissue that I wish you saw." And I think sometimes we forget that all people bear the scars of their past, of the things they've been through, of things that have been said to them, of behavior that's been pushed upon them, of abuses they've suffered. And so this one's going out to the parents of teenagers especially, and to the teenagers also. If you know somebody that has teenagers in the house, if you yourself are a teenager, you need to listen up, because I'm going to share some good information with you today. So when it comes to bullying, when I was a kid, it wasn't considered bullying as much as we called it being picked on. And it was a lot different back then because so many more families were intact. You know, the nuclear family, as they talk about, the mom and the dad, and the stability of having both parents in the house was much more prevalent when I was growing up and when I was in school than it is today. So there was a much higher level of stability back then. Number two, back then, if you had had enough and you got fed up with what these kids were doing to you, you could actually fight back. And you could still come to school the next day. Today, most school systems in the United States have a zero tolerance policy for violence, which means even if you are retaliating for someone being violent with you, you too can be expelled from school and have to find another school or be homeschooled, because expelled means you don't come back and there is no opportunity to come back, which I think is a huge mistake. Really and truly, because what it creates in these kids that are picked on is a situation where they have no means to sort of deal with this. I remember first day of freshman year, and just so you know, into my background, when I was a kid, I was very tenderhearted. I was born with a very loving spirit, I guess you could say, and as such, not being much of a fighter, I got picked on quite a bit, not to the level that we see today, I don't think. I don't think anything back then was quite as bad as what it is now, because back then, if you got picked on, you could just stay away from those kids. You could stay home. Today, it can follow you into your house. If you have any connection with the internet, whether it be Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, anything like that, PlayStation Network, people can follow you and write you nasty messages and call you names and say all kinds of things about you. So it's almost impossible to escape these days. But first day of freshman year of high school, I had decided that I wasn't going to let this happen anymore. And one of the kids that was kind of the ringleader of grouping up people to come and pick on me came up to me on the front porch there right after we got off the bus and took my pen out of my pocket. And I had just opened a savings account. And they gave me this nice cross pen, really nice pen. It was in my pocket, and he took it and wasn't going to give it back, and was holding it away from me and keeping it away from me. Well, I got mad, and I hauled off and socked him in the mouth. And he was just so shocked. I mean, truth is, if he would have fought me that day, he probably would have kicked my ass. But that wasn't the point. The point is that he knew at that point that I was not going to tolerate it anymore. And so I have some experience in this. I remember a number of days staying home because I knew what was coming if I went to school, faking being sick, having a stomach ache or whatever, and staying home because I knew what was coming. And the prevalence of that today is pretty astounding, as we'll see when I get into the stats of this. Now, when it comes to my kids and why my son Gabriel thinks this is an important issue, for those that know me, they will know this, but for everybody else, I have 5 sons, yes, 5, ranging in age from 27 down to 11. And as it so happens, my wife and I both carry a recessive gene that gives us the opportunity that anytime we would have children, those children have a chance to be born deaf. So 3 of my 5 boys were born with severe hearing loss, almost deaf by most standards. So all of them have suffered being picked on because they were deaf. Now, I understand kids are heartless, but being picked on for something you have absolutely no choice in the matter of really doesn't make sense to me. In fact, one of my best friends ever, my friend Kevin, I took up with him because I saw that people laughed at the way that he talked, and oftentimes he was trying to be a part and he couldn't hear, and he'd ask someone to repeat and they'd be like, never mind, just forget it. So he was always sort of on the outside. So I was prepared for these guys long before they ever came along. But Gabe's deaf, and he's also small. His mom was really small until she got to be about halfway through high school. I wasn't a very big guy. I think I weighed 135 when I graduated, 140, something like that. So I was never very big. And for you teenagers, you got to understand, if you're beautiful, if you're big and strong and handsome, if you're on the football team, if you're one of the leaders of any of the organizations in the school, it's pretty easy to be a high schooler. If you're small and you're scrawny and you're not athletic and you're not handsome and you're not good with the girls or whatever it happens to be, high school can be absolutely horrific. And so just please keep in mind that when you're talking to these people, when you're doing the things that you're doing, you are leaving scars on them that will stay with them for the rest of their life. And I know that to be true as well. I'm 56 years old. I graduated when I was 18. So that means I've been out of school for almost 40 years. And I can still, to this day, remember some of the things that were said to me and about me like it was said yesterday. In fact, being picked on when I was younger is one of the reasons I began to work out. After high school, I was in martial arts for a number of years. I've learned edged weapons. I'm very proficient with firearms. I had decided I was never going to let anybody take advantage of me just because they were bigger, stronger, or had the opportunity to do so. I was going to do some things for myself to sort of become equalizer. And weighed 135, 140 when I graduated. When I was at my biggest, when I was into bodybuilding, I was over 230 pounds. And even then, through all this, after all those years, those things that were said to me are still there. Now, obviously at this point, it's so far removed, it doesn't have that much of an impact. But keep in mind, again, you go back to where I come from. Mom and Dad were in the house. I had a pretty good support system. Today, there are so many kids that don't have that kind of support system. So the impact, I think, is much greater. And why this is so important is if you look at some of the people, the school shootings especially, people that go in and shoot up schools typically have a vendetta against somebody in that school. We've seen it again and again and again, that these people were outcasts. They were people that weren't popular. They weren't big and strong. They weren't handsome. They were maybe small and scrawny, nerdy, whatever you want to call them. And they end up getting their revenge in another way because they have no other outlet for the rage and the anger and everything that's built up inside of them from just the words and sometimes physical abuse that they suffer at the hands of other people within their age group. So let's look at some stats on this. If you go to stopbullyingnowfoundation.org, they have an infographic that lays this out. And if you just listen to the numbers are staggering, but I quite honestly believe this is probably, in many of these cases, they don't get reported. Okay, so these numbers I think are probably low, but some of the more dramatic ones that stick out, 280,000 students a day are physically attacked, or excuse me, 280,000 students a month are physically attacked in secondary schools. 160,000 students miss school every day for fear of being bullied. And I know that's true because I did it myself when I was young and small and scrawny and didn't have the will to fight. 77% of students are bullied either mentally, verbally, physically, and cyberbullying is making a quick rise to the top as the number one way, because if someone wants to call you something that you're not, it's broadcast to everybody. Anybody in your network sees that. 43% of kids fear harassment in the bathroom at school. I will testify to that one too, because that's always a great place, or was always a great place for two or three guys to gang up on you, throw you in the stall, slap you around, whatever they wanted to do. Stat is 1 out of 4 students will be abused by another student or youth. 1 out of 5 kids admit to being a bully or having done some bullying. So the effects of this, again, are extremely, extremely dramatic in certain people. You guys that are in school, you've got to remember you could potentially be creating a murderer or a monster through your actions. It is serious, okay? Let me convey a story that I heard a number of years ago. I used to listen to a preacher called Chuck Swindoll, and he conveyed a story in one of his sermons, and I believe he was talking about being merciful. And the details are a little fuzzy because this was probably 20-some years ago when I heard this, but the gist of the story is really sort of brings home what I'm talking about. The story was that there was a kid in school. He was not popular. He was not athletic. He was not big and handsome. And this other guy's walking home from school one day, and he happens to notice that this kid, this unpopular kid, is dragging and pulling and carrying everything from his locker. He's got all of his books. He's got his gym bag. He's got his coats. He's got everything out of his locker. And the kid goes up to him and says, "Hey, can I help you take that stuff?" And he says, "Yeah, sure." So he carries it home for him, or helps him carry it home. And when they get to the house, the kid asks him if he wants to come in and hang out for a while. And so he does, and they go in and hang out. And I believe they played, maybe it was early in the onset or the evolution of video games. They were playing video games. I don't remember exactly, but he spent most of the rest of the afternoon with this kid. And they kind of became friends, throughout high school after that. And he would help him out whenever he had the chance. But some years later, when they went to their class reunion, he saw the guy. He had lost track of him, obviously, as we all do. There's so many people that I knew and hung out with in high school that I have no idea where they're at today. But turns out the guy has got married, had a couple of kids, was doing pretty well, owned an insurance agency, if I remember correctly. And again, forgive me if you know the story. The details are a little bit fuzzy. But at some point during the evening, during their class reunion, this kid, the one that was carrying all the stuff home from school, pulled the other guy aside and he said, "I just want to share something with you that you did that you probably don't even realize that changed my life." He said, "That day when you helped me take that stuff home and you hung out with me that day," he said, "I was going home to kill myself." He said, "Things weren't really good for me at home." He said, "I was getting picked on and, abused at school, and I just had enough. I didn't feel like living anymore, and I was going to end my life. And what you did for me that day changed that decision." And can you imagine the joy you got to feel at knowing that just one simple act, a few hours, reaching out to somebody, saved that man's life? And he went on to be successful, have kids and all that. And in the same way, the things you say, a simple action, something thoughtless or careless or callous, can flip somebody the other way as well. So again, I just want to encourage you all, don't be like that. These people, maybe they are ugly, maybe they're small and scrawny, maybe they're not popular, maybe they pick their nose, I don't know, but they're people. They got a heart in their chest beating just like yours, and they deserve the dignity of being treated as a human being. Now, I'm going to back up here for just a second and talk to you about my kids. I have been very blessed that I have raised children that all have good hearts, and I think the chief among those is my son Gabriel, the one that recommended that I do this video. This is a kid that gets upset when he sees injustice in imaginary stories in movies. When he hears stories about people being abused, he just hates it. He can't stand it. He has a huge heart and a huge care for others, and just extremely considerate and kind. I'd like to think that I was like that when I was his age, and that's where he gets it, is from me. But if there's anything you want your kids to be, I think that's one of the things you would hope that they would turn out to be, and that's who he is. And if he's your friend, he's your friend. He will have your back. He will take up for you. He will cover you. He will always look out for you if he's your friend. And I think so often, because kids especially, they want to be viewed as, cool. And especially in today's society, it's just very, very different. The desire to have attention is just so enormous now. And I think for many, it's a way to have meaning in their life, to be liked by others. Everybody wants that, but for some, it's much more of a need than it is a desire. And I think we just need to remember that you could make an enormous difference positively or negatively in the lives of people. Don't bully kids, because you bully a kid today, you could see him walking through the doors of the school tomorrow with a rifle, start picking people off. And your comment could be the straw that breaks the camel's back where that is concerned. So in closing, I want to say thank y'all for tuning in. Again, if you are a teenager, please pay attention to what I'm saying. If you got teenagers, share this video with them. Let them know. Again, 56 years old, and I still hear those comments ringing in my head sometimes. When it comes to being a good person in general, love everybody. Do good wherever you have the opportunity to do so. Love your neighbor. As much as it is in your power, be at peace with every person. If you need to defend yourself, defend yourself. It is your God-given right to defend yourself. But more than anything, what this world needs right now is people that will stand up and be counted and make their voice heard. All of us, black, white, doesn't matter your race, Chinese, Middle Eastern, doesn't matter your religion, doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. There are those that seek to divide us to their own ends, and we are so much more powerful when we are united. When we're divided, we're weak. And so I just invite you all to do good when you have the opportunity. We love y'all, and hope you'll tune in again. Peace.